Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland, with me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. Well, as you can tell from the title of this episode, today we're talking about make or break things that so many people forget to plan for their wedding. My name is Kelly and I'm the host of the Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast. And when I tell you that these are make or break, I'm not exaggerating. And the best thing is that most of these items on this list don't cost you anything extra. Most of the time, it's just thinking a little bit before you make a final decision. If you listened to last week's episode, I spoke about the things that I would do first if I had to get engaged. And some of the things that I spoke about in last week's episode, I will allude to in this episode with a little bit more detail. But if you want even more detail, you can follow along on our Instagram posts and on TikTok. So if you look for Weddings Online on both platforms, I'm doing a whole series where I'm planning a wedding. It is a fictitious wedding, but I'm using my industry experience as a wedding planner, blogger, and podcaster to plan a fictitious wedding, but using a real budget, real suppliers, and then their actual availability and their pricing. And so if you want to know the actual steps to take, the order to book your suppliers, the order to make decisions, all of that kind of thing, you should follow along. But let's get started. These are the 10 things that I think are deal breakers or they are game changers if you forget to do them. Item number 1, your wedding date. So of course you're going to pick a wedding date. That's not in question, but it's how you do it. And I want to urge you to resist the temptation to just choose the first available date that's given to you. So I've said this before on the podcast that when it comes to choosing your wedding date and your wedding venue, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Sometimes you choose your wedding date and then you find wedding venues that are available on that date. Other times you choose your dream wedding venue and then you see when they're available within your kind of rough time frame, and then you solidify the date based on when they are available. There really is no wrong way to go about doing it when it comes to which one comes first. When it comes to our real wedding, we chose our date first and then we picked our venue. With our fictitious wedding, we're more relaxed about our date. And so we've got a time frame and we're going to pick a venue which will help us to solidify the date. But the reason that I'm saying you shouldn't just go with the first date that's given to you is because sometimes couples just say, yes, you're our dream venue, you're available on this date, let's go for it, without doing proper research. So when I started planning this fictitious wedding, I did a bit of research into some different things that were happening around the time of our potential wedding dates. And I'm so glad that I did, because I almost avoided, I almost ended up with what could have been a catastrophe. And so there's a Weddings Online blog post that I'm going to link in the notes to this episode with other events that are happening in 2025. And they include things like sporting events and bank holidays and different things that on the top of your head you might not know. If I had to say, I want to get married on the 14th of February, you'd probably go, okay, that's Valentine's Day, good date. But then if you really think about it, a lot of the florists in your local area will probably already have huge non-wedding flower commitments around that time. So it might be worth thinking about that, when you're booking your wedding florist around the time of Valentine's Day. Is that wise? Things like sporting dates. So I would have picked a Saturday in May for this fictitious wedding of ours. But when I looked, there are 2 football finals, each of which is on a Saturday in May. And knowing that so many people who would be coming to the wedding are fans of football and would really be invested in that, I don't want them to be distracted. I don't want them to feel like they have to choose. And I definitely don't want them watching the game on their phone at the wedding table. Like, that's just weird. So all I'm saying is, don't just take the first wedding date that's given to you. Do some research, find out if there are any reasons that you may not want to go for that date, and then make your decision. Item number 2, so many people forget to have a backup weather plan. And now I'm not only talking about rainy weather, although that is important. You want to think about if it's going to be extra cold, if it's going to be extra hot, if it's going to be very sunny. Sometimes you need to just give it a little bit more thought so that if the weather takes a bit of a turn just before your wedding, that you have a backup plan. Now, your backup plan could be as elaborate as having a marquee available so you can take an outdoor wedding and have it indoors, or it could be things like having extra umbrellas, cozy blankets, special mats that you can have entering the venue so that people can wipe their feet if there's a lot of wet mud and that kind of thing around. Really what I'm saying is give it some thought. You don't need to be tracking the weather every day leading up to your wedding, but if you know that the time of year is most likely to be a bit rainy or a bit sunny or windy or whatever it might be, just have a think in your mind about what you could do to have a backup, and then closer to the time, have a conversation with your wedding venue, your venue coordinator, or your wedding planner to see what you can do and if you want to implement your plan B. Item number 3, something that people do, which is, it has the potential to make or break your wedding, is sending out your save the dates too early. And I might be thinking, is there such a thing as sending it too early? Surely not. But actually there is. There are a few things that you need to have in place before you send out save the dates. Number 1, you need a date. That's obvious. You can't get people to save the date till you have a date. But in order to know that your date is your date, you have to have a wedding venue as well. And so I know we spoke about this not that long ago in this episode about the chicken or egg situation. But in order to invite your guests to save the date for your wedding, you need to know that your wedding date is solidified and that you can, in fact, host the people you're getting to save the date in your venue. So what you don't want to do is create a save the date that you're going to send to, let's say, 250 guests. And then you book your venue, and your venue can only accommodate 150 guests, but in every other way, the venue ticks the boxes. Because then you have 100 people you have to uninvite to your wedding, which is just poor etiquette. So my advice is to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, then you send your save the dates. And if you end up having people come back and say, we wish we could be there, but we can't, you then have a lovely problem of being able to invite some extra people that you hadn't originally thought you could have at your big day. Instead of doing it the other way around, we've got to uninvite people. Item number 4, you've got to remember that there's some extra things you might not have budgeted for. For example, postage costs. So when it comes to sending out your invitations and then after the wedding, sending your thank you cards, don't forget that you're not just paying for the actual item you're sending, but for the postage as well. And also don't forget the envelope and the stamp. Item number 5, this is a legitimate deal breaker. And that is that so many brides forget to break in their shoes. If you've ever spent even just a night in a pair of uncomfortable heels, you'll probably understand that if you have to spend the whole day, your whole wedding day, your whole memorable wedding day in uncomfortable shoes that make your feet hurt, that make your back hurt, that make you feel miserable, you'll probably know that this is not something you want to aim for. So take some time to break in your shoes. You don't want to wear them for the first time on your wedding day, and you certainly don't want to be wearing them for the first time, in the couple of days leading up. Give yourself a bit more time. Wear those wedding shoes around the house to get your feet comfortable. So you really want to break your shoes in. They'll still look lovely. You just want them to be comfortable. And if you're really stuck, you can try what's called the hairdryer trick. So you put on a pair of thick socks, you then squeeze your feet into your shoes, and you use a hairdryer to apply heat to the parts of the shoes that are making your feet sore or pinched. And that should create a little bit more flexibility in the shoes, which makes them easier to wear, and your feet will thank you. And when in doubt, a backup pair of shoes will help you when it comes to dancing. We've seen loads of brides wear Converse, lovely sandals. There's so many ways you can wear comfortable shoes at certain points in the day. Maybe when you're getting your photos taken and you're walking around the location, you don't want to be walking around in uncomfortable heels. Item number 6, don't forget to ask your guests and your wedding party if they have any food allergies or any diet restrictions that you can accommodate for them. You don't have to do anything fancy. It could be as simple as having it be an option when people RSVP to let you know if they have any special requirements, and then communicate those to your caterer and your venue coordinator as soon as you possibly can. And this is one way to make sure that everyone who's at your wedding has an amazing time and they're not worried that they might eat something that could be potentially fatal, or even just something that makes them uncomfortable physically. Item number 7, speaking of meals, don't forget to provide your suppliers with a meal. There are some suppliers that won't need a meal. For example, if you are having a celebrant or a solemnizer or somebody who's only at your wedding ceremony and they're going to conduct things for you there and then they're going to go home or to another wedding or whatever they've got planned, you don't need to accommodate them when you're thinking about the head count for the meals. But any supplier who's going to be at your wedding reception, making the wedding happen for you, you should think about them and make sure they have not just a meal, but a hot meal. So that would be people like your photographer, your DJ, if they're there at the point of eating, your wedding planner, your MC, your entertainers, those types of things. Consider those people, have a conversation with your wedding venue and your wedding coordinator to see what options are available. Different venues have different options. Some of them say that whatever you're providing for the guests, you should provide for your wedding suppliers. Other venues have a special hot meal option for suppliers that they can bring out when the suppliers have a moment. Because of course, while your guests start to eat, some of your suppliers will still need to be working. For example, your wedding band may be playing at that point, or your DJ might be playing music. And so they might eat at slightly different times, and you don't want their food to be sitting out on a table getting cold. So have a conversation with your caterers to see what your options are, what meals you have available, but just make sure that you're feeding your suppliers. It's a long day. They're going to be on their feet. Of course, you're paying them, and technically you don't have to feed people, but it's such a lovely gesture to say, we love that you're looking after us for our wedding, and we want to make sure we look after you too. Option number 8. I love the idea of giving roles to the wedding party. This is a deal breaker in the sense that if you don't give people roles, they will arrive and not know what to do. And then you as the couple will either end up doing the things that they should be doing, or you will be managing them. And on your wedding day, that's not the thing you want to be doing, managing people and delegating tasks. Instead, have a think ahead of time about things that each person could do so that when it comes to the day, you don't have to worry about it. So, for example, you could have somebody whose sole responsibility is to make sure everything that's been hired is returned to where you've hired it from. So think of suits, decor, anything that has been hired and needs to be returned. And sometimes it is the place you've hired it from that will come and, take everything back, but other times you need to send it. So someone on the wedding party could oversee that. You may want to have somebody who's going to hold on to your gifts and your cards, and they can send them back to you. They can drop them off at your home, whatever you need, but somebody who's thinking about that on the day so you don't have to. And then how about this? Some roles for the wedding party on the morning of the wedding. Some fun things that they can do that are also really important. Somebody who's going to make a playlist to keep things really fun and happy when you're getting ready. Someone who's going to make sure that everybody's eating and staying hydrated, because it's very important that you do both. Someone who's going to keep an eye on the schedule and the timing to make sure that everything runs on time and that you're all on track. Someone who's going to take loads of photos and videos, and then keep thinking of that kind of thing. It depends on how many people you have on the wedding party and the types of roles you have, but the key here is to give everyone something to do so that they know that they're being useful and they're not pestering you to ask if they can do anything. Item number 9, include some time and some budget for your alterations. You will thank me when it gets to this point of getting alterations done that you have factored in the time when you're choosing your wedding dress and you're looking at the timeline, and that you factored it into your budget, that you aren't stuck at the end. So alterations are super important because most people don't fit into a dress perfectly and things will need to be taken in or taken up, and it's very normal. So if that's you and you've put that in your budget and if you've put that on your timeline, you will feel so much more relaxed and stress-free for having thought about this ahead of time. And finally, a deal breaker is to remember to eat during your wedding prep. So on the morning of the wedding, you want to make sure that you've had a hearty, nutritious breakfast. You want to make sure you've had lots of water. Things can be very hectic. The day feels like it's really full from the minute you start getting ready. You can probably feel quite nervous and maybe you don't feel like you have an appetite. But the last thing you want is to get to the top of the aisle, to feel woozy, and then to feel like you might faint or something because you haven't had enough to eat, and then you've got to spend the day, taking photos, maybe even in the heat. Just make sure that you set yourself up for success by starting the day with breakfast, having lots of water to drink, and then you will have all the energy you need to enjoy your wedding day as much as you possibly can. Well, thank you for listening today. The Wedding Wednesdays of Weddings Online podcast is produced by me, Kelly, and mixed, mastered, and edited by Glenn Hartman. For more wedding planning tips, advice, checklists, and more, visit weddingsonline.ie.